If you own real estate and you don't listen to this episode, you're not just behind, you're unprotected. Today, we're sitting down with someone who's filed over 35,000 evictions across Florida. This is tactical, tested, and straight from the courtroom. And today, we're talking about how to use legal frameworks to increase profit, protect downside, and structure deals like the pros do. Our guest is Jerron Kelley, a real estate attorney, a real estate investor, and the guy that the top operators call when things get messy or before they ever do. You're going to learn a lot of things, but mostly how to structure leases that instantly protect your net operating income, the exact eviction triggers and legal tools that keep problem tenants from crushing your cash flow, and why investors lose thousands during acquisitions. So, what's something that a high-level operator right from the get-go can do to change their legal infrastructure, their lease, their due diligence, something that you see is a big mistake that happens with most?
Absolutely. Let me break this into two pieces because it kind of depends on the scenario. So let's talk about someone who is a new acquisition. So one of the most important things in any new acquisition is, of course, buying a property right. So I'm not going to get into the pricing of the property, but one of those main factors is doing your due diligence, getting your rent rolls, getting the Estoppel letters signed by tenants, by the way. So not landlord signed Estoppel letters. Sure, maybe if you buy a 20-unit property, you can't get 100% of them signed by tenants. Maybe one or two are signed by landlords, but typically you should be getting 90+% signed by the tenants. And so the tenants are indicating on a legal document, legal form, what the terms of the tenancy are, whether they have a lease, whether they're month to month, what the rent is, if they have a security deposit, if they have a last month of rent, the day of the month that the rent is due, how much might be in arrears at that point if they're behind on rent. We do a high volume of transactions throughout the state of Florida, mostly in South Florida. Of course, we do 300 to 400 evictions per month. I can't tell you how many times that I see rent rolls that are either A, incorrect, or B, completely falsified by sellers. I've seen it many, many times. And oftentimes they do not match those Estoppel letters, nor do they match the lease. So those are the three things that we compare together is the rent roll that the seller produces, the Estoppel letters that the tenant signed, and then the leases, if there are leases, or if they're expired, we still ask for expired leases, even if they expired a year before or 6 months before, just to kind of compare and see what's going on and what deposits were put up front for that tenancy, because you want to make sure that you're not buying a property, let's say a 20-unit property that has tons of issues where there's tenants who 10 of the 20 tenants are in arrears, or let's say maybe 18 out of 20 of these units were released 2 months ago at a low rent rate, and you can't increase their rents for another 10 months. And that you understand Florida landlord-tenant law. And I'll give you an example here. As I just mentioned, many of these leases could be month-to-month leases. So you need to understand how long is it going to take for me to either A, try to get the tenant to agree to a rent increase if they're month-to-month and they're well below market value, and or if they don't agree to the increase in rent, how long is it going to take me to terminate their tenancy? And then if they don't vacate after I terminate their tenancy, how long is it going to take for me to evict them? So in that scenario, you need to know that Florida landlord-tenant law has changed in the last couple of years. It's no longer a 15-day notice of termination of month-to-month tenancy. It's now a 30-day notice, minimum 30-day notice. So that
I didn't know that. Yeah.
So I'm just giving a few examples here of things that you want to make sure you're doing in the acquisition process where the law, whether it be landlord-tenant law or some other type of Florida law that governs that process here.
No, I get it. I can't tell you how many times, like, for example, so I started in 2001 in Miami, my first fourplex that I bought from, again, our audience is anything from a rookie all the way to a developer that's building $300 million projects.
Yep.
Yeah. So I remember I bought a fourplex from a wholesaler that said it was fully occupied, $1,600 a month in rent. This is below Fifth in South Beach, and this is exactly what he's talking about. I used the seller's rent roll. I used private money. It was a quick moving deal. Then I acquired the property. Of course, right? At the closing, I was past due diligence. It was a hard money deal. So I paid, this is back in the day, like $300,000 for this property. I was hard $30,000, past my 7-day due diligence. I did not have Jerron as my lawyer back then. And of course, at closing, I looked at what the wholesaler had sent me for leases and deposits. And at closing, when the credit was supposed to come at closing for the deposits, there were no deposits. So it was too late. And I said to them, but wait a minute, here is the original, offering from a wholesaler on an assigned contract, right? I didn't know. I wasn't sophisticated. So whatever, I closed the deal. Of course, I go and I drop off a letter, I don't know, a couple of days. It says, I'm the new owner. Here's what your rent is. Here's what you pay. That's not my rent. What are you talking about? I pay $900. And it becomes a mess, right? And at that time, it was a quick moving deal. I was a rookie and I didn't understand what an Estoppel letter is. Today, I get it. So the Estoppel it certifies, go ahead, and it's critical to get it signed, not just by the seller or the broker or the wholesaler, but by the tenant, correct?
Really
right.
Want by the tenant, maybe the tenant and the landlord too, both, but definitely the tenant. You want them to sign that because it's verifying all of those things that I mentioned before, what the rent amount is, the due date, if there's any balance in arrears, deposits paid up front, et cetera, whether there even is a lease or maybe there's not a lease. I've had many situations where landlords say, oh yeah, everyone's on a lease, but come to find out, well, the lease has expired 2 months ago or vice versa. Because remember in Florida, one of the best things is when you're buying a property, when I buy properties, I love to see month-to-month tenants in there. And the reason why is I have the most leverage when they're month-to-month because I can either tell them, let's say they're paying $1,400 a month for a 2-bedroom and I want to bump them to $1,850. I can tell them immediately, hey, listen, starting, we're closing this in mid-June. I'm going to give you a 30-day notice of new rent, or alternatively, this is a notice of termination. So either August 1st, begin paying the new amount of rent of $1,850, or we're going to be terminating your tenancy as of July 31st and begin eviction August 1st. So those are, when you have a lease that's still got another 8 to 10 months on the lease, there's really nothing you can do. You have no leverage as the new owner that's stepping into the shoes of the old landlord.
Right.
You're stepping into the shoes of the landlord in that lease.
Can't raise the rents or anything. I mean, listen, I've even acquired properties where there was a lease and it was below market. And then when I get there, and then when we get to that point, the tenant says, no, I put a kitchen in. I spent $2,800. And here's my receipts. And this landlord promised me no rent increase for 24 months or 36 months. I mean, I've heard it all from tenants. And I don't know is there any way besides an Estoppel to protect yourself in that situation without getting
protection? The best protection. Yeah,
the best.
By far the best. Because one other thing too is once you close, the chance of, let's say you have to evict this tenant, and they're coming up with stories and excuses, and they said, oh, landlord told me I didn't have to pay for 2 months, or I did these improvements, and here's something in writing, and you don't know whether that's the landlord's signature. To go get the old owner who you just closed with a week ago to come and testify at your eviction hearing is going to be nearly impossible. Even just getting them to respond to emails or do anything after you close on a property is really not the situation that you want to be in, that you're having to beg the old owner that you just bought the property from. Because I can tell you that in a lot of situations, most of our closings go very smoothly, but even the smooth closings, there's always going to be a little bit of annoyance between the buyer and the seller. One party or both parties always feel that the other party got over on them. It's just a natural psychology. The seller feels like, yeah, the buyer during inspection period asked for 10,000 in credits, and I didn't give him the 10,000, but I gave him 5,000. I really shouldn't have. He really, he drove the bus over me, and really got me for $5,000 that I should have never paid him. Whereas the buyer, on the other hand, says, oh well, I should have gotten $10,000 and I acquiesced to only 5,000, and now I've got to put money into this property, and the seller screwed me, and it's just. In nearly every transaction, at the end of the transaction, the two parties rarely, if ever, want to go out and shake hands and have dinner together. It happens sometimes, but
and you represent both sides all the time, right?
Yeah, I can. Sure, absolutely.
Right.
So we represent sellers in many deals and buyers in other deals. So sure. So one other thing
any tricks to that, right? Like buy side versus sell side. Is there something that Jerron is doing a little bit differently, or how you advise? Is there any kind of leverage points that you advise your clients that's typically a little bit out of the box?
Sure, absolutely. So let's say I'm representing a buyer, especially if it's a bigger property with more units and more due diligence and inspection here that's going to be needed, meaning there's more moving parts. Typically, we're going to ask for a longer inspection period. So whereas, let's say maybe someone's buying a duplex, I bought a lot of duplexes, triplexes, quads, sixplexes. So I own 42 units spread between a whole variety of smaller properties, somewhere between 2 and 6 units each. But with my clients that are buying 20 units, 40 units, 80 units, you want that inspection period to no longer be 7 or 10 days, where maybe that's fine for a duplex or maybe a quadplex, but you want to have a longer inspection period of maybe 30 days, maybe longer, for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons, for example, is you want to possibly do lien searches during that period of time to come back and see if there's any open expired permits. You want to make sure there's language in the contract that obligates the seller to close those out if there are open expired permits or code violations or municipal liens and fines that pop up. So those are examples. There's other things that we recommend depending on the situation. Sometimes buyers are buying cash. Sometimes they're using financing. But for financing, we also want to, have a longer financing contingency if possible. But every deal is different, and it depends on the market. As you know, Jerry, 3 years ago, we were in a seller's market where people were lining up for deals, and you'd have to go in hard day one, all cash, no financing contingency. Even if you were getting some financing, you just have to find a way to make the loan work within the closing period. But a lot of times there was no inspection period. And so if I was representing a buyer 3 or 4 years ago, I just understood, I would let the buyers know the risk of going hard day one, because you're in for the deal. Your escrow deposit is hard. If you're putting $200,000 down in escrow on a $2 million purchase, you're buying this property or you're losing your $200,000, one way or the other.
Right. No, I get it.
No matter
quick
what
question.
you find.
Yeah, it's interesting. So let's say, because I've done deals like that, you've done deals like that. So let's say I'm buying, I don't know, a 10-unit building, right? And I have to go hard day one. So it's a $2 million purchase, I don't know, and I'm hard 50,000 day one, and I waive due diligence.
Yes.
But at the same time, if we go back to the Estoppel letters, are you able to require, okay, I'll take it hard this day, $200,000, no inspection, but I require Estoppel letters signed by tenants with specific rent period, with leases, everything. And if they somehow don't deliver, even though you're past due diligence and you went hard first day, is there a gray area where they didn't deliver that? So it kind of is a due diligence, but not really. But if they screw it up, can I get my money back?
Okay, good question. I'm going to give caveats, as lawyers always do. So,
right, of course, I understand. Yeah.
One of the caveats. Well, first thing I would say is if I'm representing a buyer, I'm always asking for Estoppel letters. I don't care if it's hard day one. I don't care if it's 30-day inspection period. I don't care what the deal is. I'm asking for Estoppel letters. But a best practice is to make sure that in the contract and or an addendum or the additional provisions section, you're putting in there that seller is obligated to provide tenant signed Estoppels prior to maybe at least 5 days prior to closing or something like that, or at least 3 days prior to closing. If that language is in there, then they need to do that. If it's not in there, well, we can request the Estoppel letters, and oftentimes the brokers will help facilitate and work that out. I guess as a seller, they could tell you to go fly a kite if there's no language in there and there's no inspection period. It becomes.
But Is there like a secret sauce? Like, so for example, I'm just thinking out of the box, right? You gave me an idea. So if I waive inspection, but they don't deliver, and I'm hard, right? Acceptance, but they're required, just like they are for title, for example, to deliver those estoppels, and they don't. Can you, as my attorney, get me my deposit back, or does it become a battle?
Threaten it, and then it might become a battle. I don't know that the sellers will just roll over and acquiesce, but it's certainly a legal argument to be made, and it may hold some water if it is a specific contractual provision that the sellers are breaching. And then you can say, hey, you must provide them prior to closing, but you probably need to wait till the closing date and keep asking for that. And if they still don't provide it prior to closing, then you can refuse to close at that point and say, I'm ready, willing, and able to close if you provide these letters, but you're not providing them.
Because it's almost a way to, let's say, like I'm thinking strategy, right? To try to have a more competitive contract on the buy side, right? Because real estate profit boost, we kind of flow with it, and I'm thinking out of the box. So if I'm buying that property, let's say for $1 million, whatever, again, and I give them $200,000, no finance contingency, waive inspection, 60-day close, right? So they think I'm hard day one. You're holding the escrow money, but inside the contract says estoppels must be delivered, right? Leases must be delivered fully. This, that.
The different due diligence items that you want to make sure that they're delivering.
So are you technically in acceptance, or do they have to still perform all of those things? Otherwise, you don't technically have to, or there's a battle, or those kind of things.
Perform, and therefore, and let me just say that it's not common for sellers to not provide estoppel letters when requested, as well as rent rolls, as well as these other due diligence items. Sometimes it's pulling teeth. Sometimes you have to remind people. Sometimes you have to request multiple times. But typically the broker involved will help facilitate that, because the broker's incentivized to get paid too. They want the deal to close. So if you're working with a competent broker, someone who's good, they're going to help facilitate this. They're going to help to work with the seller. They might even go to the seller's house or to their office to help and sit there with a laptop and put together a rent roll and go knock on doors and gather those estoppel letters and do what needs to happen to make sure that the deal closes, because that's something that the buyer has required in the contract, or even just requested. The seller, remember, the broker, maybe most of their compensation or all of their compensation may be paid by the seller, but at the same time, any competent real estate broker is going to want to leave the buyer happy, because that buyer may turn into a seller in 2 years or 5 years. Again, you want them tenant signed and not landlord signed. A lot of times landlords want to be lazy. They'll make one knock on the door. Maybe 50% of the tenants will sign the letters, but the other 50%, they'll say, okay, well, I'll just provide these. The landlord will provide them. We don't like landlord signed estoppel letters.
No, lots of value there. Real investors are using this boost to boost returns. Real estate profit boost. So why aren't you? Watch now. Click below. Got it. No, 100%. So since we're still in the acquisition mode, right? I've seen, syndicators, small investors skip title and closing. They think every attorney is just going to nail it. But what I've learned, and I've seen deals unravel because someone trusted a boilerplate title company with no commercial or residential experience, but title company. That's all they do. So Jerron, break down, the top 3 red flags in a title report, or, what I saw, what most buyers miss in lien or encroachment language. And I've seen stuff fall apart that dragged out 9 months,
Let's start with Florida basics for anyone who's watching this who maybe is thinking about investing in Florida, or maybe has just dabbled a little bit. So in Florida, there's 2 types of entities that can do a closing. In Florida, one is a title company and the other is a law firm. The difference between the two is that a title agent can own a title company, but they do not have to be an attorney. I would say at least half, if not significantly more than half, I'd probably guesstimate 70% or more of title companies are not owned by attorneys and have no direct affiliation with an attorney.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I assumed it was both. Right.
No, a lot of times they're joint ventures between like a title agent and a brokerage that's in-house of like a Keller Williams or
Remax or right.
Remax or whatever it is. Or sometimes they're just little mom and pop title companies that open up and they do their, 10 closings a month and they're happy and they make money and that's great, but they're not attorneys. And so what's the difference is that a law firm, of course, has to be attorneys. Our law firms are owned in Florida 100% by attorneys. Although I love you, Jerry, and I'd love an influx of money. If you wanted to invest in my law firm, I'd have to say no, because it's the Florida bar rules do not allow you or anyone else who's a non-attorney to own a piece of a Florida law firm. Other states, they can. So the point is that while some title companies can be owned or affiliated with attorneys, many and or most are not. And my strong advice to real estate investors who are investing in multifamily or commercial real estate, whether it be retail or industrial, please get an attorney. Don't go with a title company that's not owned or actively managed, and you do not have a direct connection with an attorney through your transaction. It's a quick way to get in trouble. It's a quick way to get into a bad contract. It's a quick way to get into messy situations. And whether you use us or use another competent Florida attorney, please use an attorney on those types of deals.
Any red flags or the mistakes that you've seen by using a title company versus an attorney?
Sure. Well, let's just start with the very beginning, because we talked about you need to buy right, but from a legal perspective, you need to get into contract right. So make sure that the terms of your contract, you fully understand them, agree with them, and understand the consequences of them. We mentioned a couple things already, such as like a 0-day inspection, like going hard on your money right away, or not having a financing contingency. We've mentioned some language that needs to be in the contract from a buyer's perspective. If you are a buyer, where all those open and expired permits and code violations and all of those other what would not technically be considered clouds on title, those should be closed out by a seller. And I strongly recommend that you put language like that in there. But there could be different other contingencies that could be in there. Could be based on the sale of another property. Let's say a buyer is going to buy a property, but they need to sell their other property to 1031 the money into this property to not pay taxes. So if I'm representing the buyer on this transaction, but that buyer is the seller on another transaction, and they need to get the money to close, I'm going to want to make this purchase that I'm involved in, where they are a buyer on, I'm going to want to make it contingent upon the sale of the other property, if I can do that. Now, if it's a highly competitive deal, I get there's some risk.
No, I get it. It's almost a 1031 reverse. It's simultaneously or right. It can happen in reverse.
Yeah,
Understood. Right.
It might be a traditional 1031. But I'm going to want to talk about those details with my buyer to see what their confidence level that their other deal that they're selling is going to close, and what the time frame is, and what contingencies are left on that deal, where that buyer could maybe pull out of that deal, tank that deal, which then would tank this deal. And if they don't have the right language in the contract, they could lose their full $200,000 deposit or $500,000 deposit.
And you've seen this before, huh?
I've seen it before.
Right.
And what sadly happens, Jerry, is I love that we've got a great network of people that send us clients that are in trouble, because what's happening, we're seeing more and more often on a lot of deals, not all, of course, but what used to be near zero deals, now maybe I'm seeing about maybe 10 to 20% of deals involving seller financing. So we can help with the broker and to structure a deal where many times sellers in this market, now that it's starting to turn a little more towards a buyer's market, sellers in many cases are open towards doing some type of seller financing. What that means is, let's say the seller owns the property outright. Maybe they've owned it for 30 years. A lot of the baby boomers who are retiring, they want stable income. Maybe they thought about cashing out and selling their $2 million property and taking all the whole $2 million.
I love seller financing.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't make sense from them from a tax perspective to take a full $2 million, and then that's a big tax liability in any given year. So maybe what makes sense is maybe they do some seller financing. They finance $1 million of that. So essentially The buyer is buying it for $2 million. They're going to give $1 million. The buyer only has to come up with $1 million as opposed to coming up with a full $2 million. And that $1 million that the seller is doing seller financing, they're going to get a decent interest rate on it. Whatever's negotiated between the parties, maybe it's 6.5%, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 7. And benefit in most cases, as you know, you're an insurance expert, you're the guru for insurance. One of the great things about almost all these seller financing deals is that they don't require wind. And so for a buyer, that's incredible. Like if they can do without that and not have to pay that exorbitant pricing, I think it's great.
No, I agree. I love seller financing. The building that I'm looking at, my building here, which is retail, I've had seller financing for 3 years. What did I pay? $2.9 million. I gave him 30% down back then, 36 months ago. He gave me 5.5% interest only. Wow. He agreed to waive the wind because he also knows that the land value is almost as high as the structure in this particular location. So here's the funny thing. I renovated 400,000. I raised the lease. I pay the guy early every month for 3 years. His name's Ed. He's retired, moved to Merritt Island. He's a retired commercial appraiser, right? So that's great. He gets it. So I had a balloon last month. Guess what I did? 3 months ago, I called him and I said, Ed, let's kick the can. Yeah. You're retired, right? Have some more beer, right? That's how he loves to drink beer.
And it works. Liability down the road so that he doesn't have to pay all this tax. He's just paying tax on the interest.
Correct.
He's not paying on the principal. You're paying him back. So, and maybe he'll get that, a few years before he passes away. And then it's, maybe there's some kind of step up basis or something depending on.
And that's exactly what he said. So he actually gave me another year and it only went from 5 to 6%. He added 1% and I'm still on an interest only loan. Here's the good news. I'm cash flowing because I'm stabilized, right? My rents went increase. I renovated and everything like that. And I thought I was going to cash out refi, but rates are still too high. So I chose to kick it down the road. And I'm actually getting $40,000 to $50,000 a year in cash flow because of the lower mortgage and the interest only, right? Until I'm waiting on, I'm hoping that rates come down. Let's see what happens.
The Fed cuts. We all are. So, we'll see how that goes.
Do you structure seller financing? You can structure the mortgages, the liens, everything of that nature.
Draft the mortgage and note. So we'll help to structure it with the contract and the addendums. Then we get into contract. Great. Everything's great. We do the title work. We make sure the buyer's getting clear title, clearing everything. And then we'll do the closing docs, everything, especially if we are the actual settlement agent. And then we'll issue the title policy. And then before closing, maybe a week before closing, we'll draft up the mortgage and note. And then we'll circulate it to the parties. They may have a few comments or edits here and there. And then And then we close on that. So and then essentially the seller is the bank at that point. And it's a really
it's great.
In this economy, it's wonderful because you have this weird it's like a Venn diagram, like multiple things going on here. Again, you've got these boomers that they're retiring, and many times they've owned these properties for 20, 30, 40 years. They've
Correct.
equity in them. They don't want to pay taxes, or at least huge amounts of taxes, and they're willing to get a higher price for the property because if I'm a buyer, if I can pay a 6% interest rate rather than pay a bank 7%, and I don't need certain types of insurance, sure, I'm going to have liability and maybe.
No, I get it.
You're the expert. You'll tell us what we need. But if I can save $10,000 or $20,000 a year on insurance, I absolutely would love to pay I would pay a higher price for a property in those circumstances. If I'm getting a reasonable interest rate and paying less for insurance, things start to make sense.
You want higher profits without higher risk. The blueprint's right here. Hit subscribe and watch Real Estate Profit Boost. Is Jerron, if you're going to be buying properties today, whether it's your first fourplex or a 30 unit or a 100 unit or a development site or whatever it is, when is the best time to sit with you, right? Because most people say, hey, I'm in contract. I got this thing offline. That's a rookie. Or I got it from my real estate investment club. That's another rookie. Or I have an overcomplicated, from Greenberg Traurig, the biggest law firm in the world, right? And they go in and they wonder why deals don't close. So when is the best time to meet with you, right? Not because I've seen that mistake 100 times. They don't have you on the team. They come to you after the fact. So I'll
about
let you talk to
having a
that.
team.
Right.
You're spot on. If you're really going to be getting into this game, into the investing game, whether it's buying your first duplex or buying your 10th, 20 unit building, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you fill the spots on your team. That includes a great insurance guy, you. That includes an attorney, of course, a real estate attorney that knows what they're doing. That can include having let's say, a cost segregation expert and doing accelerated depreciation. Make sure you understand what that is. Go watch YouTube videos on it. I can refer you to someone. Making sure that you've got a very good accountant, that you're taking the right deductions, making sure that you've got someone that can put together your LLC formation and your estate planning. We have an attorney here at our law firm that does that. Who's very good at that, and put together a trust or put together LLCs and operating agreements, and make sure you've got your protections, legal protections from having your assets protected, but also from a tax perspective. So that's where kind of a CPA and an attorney and an estate planning attorney work together to make sure that you're doing what you need to do. And then, of course, having a great broker, or maybe there's multiple brokers, depending on what kind of deals you're looking at. But certainly, if you're looking to list your property, you want a great broker. Sometimes, if you're buying properties in multifamily, maybe talk to 2, 3, 4 different brokers, because they may have different deals coming in at different times. And
100%.
Sometimes off-market deals.
Right.
I found several off-market deals over the years from a few different brokers that they don't really list properties. They don't even put them on LoopNet. They really are just off-market. So those are great members of the team to have. I'm sure there's probably a few other spots, like an inspector.
No, I get it.
Having someone who's a good inspector to go inspect the properties. But that's a good start. If you can fill those spots up,
right.
And then to answer your question with regards to me,
if
you are serious about this and you're really out there scouting and you have the money to buy a property and you're looking to get under contract, give me a call. I'd rather have a 20-minute call with you, and I'll have that initial call for free and learn about what you're doing and what kind of offer that you're about to put out there. And we can talk about me reviewing your offer, making sure that it's done properly before you sign it, before you sign any addendums that's going to get you in deep hot water. I want to make sure that we're on board and I'm protecting you. Again, do the right things up front, and you will have so many less headaches down the road.
There's the key right there. So listen, and Real Estate Profit Boost, right? We're all about protecting what, you making a mistake. And whether you're a beginner in this audience or you're a sophisticated investor, right? The key is preparation, right? But what I've learned is if you don't underwrite your attorney, your broker, your insurance guy, your lender, or all of those things, that's where the real problems exist. You underwrite people based on values.
A mile for you, it really, because
right.
There's the basic services that most any vendor can do, and then are they going to go that extra mile? Are they really going to step up when the time is right and the heat is on?
And in my experience, it's across the board. I could tell you, like, if my kids go to school, if there's 10 teachers, and I'll be blunt, 9 suck. They're there because, they're getting a paycheck. They're going to work. Yeah. Right. It's the same with lawyers, same with accountants, same with insurance guys. They have hidden motivations, things for their pocket, do another deal, do another transaction. But there's only about, there's an old saying, 75% of 75% of the work is done by 25% of the workforce. Yeah. So if you think all attorneys, insurance people are like, they're not.
Well, again, why you do my insurance and I moved my portfolio a few years ago is because you suggested that I get into Citizens for almost all of my policies. And it meant that it would slash your commissions by like 60, 70%. And that to me just shows integrity, because you're in it for the long game. You're in it for the relationships. You're in it.
We call it LTV, lifetime value of the client. Do the right thing. The universe will reward you.
Maybe it'll take you 3 years to earn the money that some other agent would in 1 year. But guess what? I'm not with that agent anymore, and I'll probably be with you for the next 25, 30 years. So.
And you've sent me 10 clients, and I've sent you 10 clients, and we do a podcast together and a webinar. So that's what I mean about underwriting the people. You will become the average of the 5 people that you hang out with the most. So you better make sure their values aligned.
So yes, and one other thing with closings, one other thing I recommend for people buying new properties, getting into the game, or even experienced investors, make sure that you have a landlord-friendly lease. I can't tell you how many
I
see They
Yeah,
use
you
the
hit it
Florida
perfect.
Realtors lease. Yeah, they
Right.
use the Florida Realtors lease, which is okay. I mean, listen, it does the trick. It gets people under lease. It has the basics in there, but it's a very, very, I don't know, balanced lease. It leaves a lot of things
Right.
out of it. And I, as a landlord, I don't want a balanced lease. I want a landlord-friendly lease because I'm a landlord and I want my tenants to sign that lease. Now, I'll give you a couple examples of things that should be in your lease. That is, for example, in our lease that we sell to our clients and most of them use, one of
Mm-hmm.
them is to make sure that any fees that you're putting in that lease are deemed as additional rent. And why do I say that? And why is that necessary? Because, for example, the Florida Realtors lease does not have this language. And what does that mean in reality? That means that if a tenant falls behind on rent in Florida, you have to serve a 3-day notice on the tenant. So you can go post the notice, you can hand deliver it, you can mail it. There's actually a new law coming out starting July 1st that you can e-serve it as long as you have an addendum that the tenant agrees to. I don't want to
Nice.
get too far off the beaten track here, but you serve the 3-day notice and there's a late fee. If you're using the Florida Realtors lease, for example, or some other type of lease, there's thousands of different types of leases out there that
Right.
don't deem late fees to be additional rent or any other fees you're trying to put in there, then your 3-day notice is defective and your eviction could be dismissed or delayed if you move for eviction. So make sure that your lease deems any and all fees that are put in that lease as additional rent so that you can add them to the 3-day notice. So by example,
I didn't know this.
let's
I
say
didn't
rent's
know. I mean, you did my late, but go ahead.
yeah, let's say
Very powerful. Go ahead.
yeah, $2,000 a month. Late fee is $100. And one other thing we add on our lease, amongst many other things, but one other important thing on this note, we also add a notice serving fee so that if they default on the lease, like they don't pay their rent on time, I also put in my lease a $100 late fee and I put a $100 notice serving fee. So then I'm able to put not just the $2,000 in base rent, I'm able to put the $100 late fee and the $100 notice serving fee. So then they have to owe $2,200 to cure that default. So that's
Wow.
for me as a landlord to make money and you as a landlord to make money. You can make money on defaults because I can tell you that I have a lot of clients, and I get it. When early on, before we had a lease like this, when I bought my first property 15 years ago, it's annoying when a tenant falls behind on the rent. You get really annoyed about it. Now I look at
Right.
it as a revenue source. I'm like, this is great.
So question, let's say, because in my experience with most evictions that you handle, right? Because you're super fast. I mean, this gentleman does has done over 35,000 evictions in his career. They do anywhere between 200 to 400 a month. And the cost is, he's almost, I call him the ticket clinic of evictions because of that side of his business, right? You're probably paying $1,200 to $1,600. You're being scared by a lawyer on evictions.
That
Yeah.
they're paying now. Yeah, we charge $295 plus the
There you go.
fee. So
Yeah.
looking at
So he's got it down to a science. It's electronic. It's quick. And I don't think whenever you've handled one of my evictions, I don't think it's ever gone past 2 to 3 weeks. Right. So that in itself.
Depending on the scenario and what happens.
No, I know. And I've seen you go for defaults. And what happens is you get them out quickly. And I normally don't have to pay additional fees or different writ of possessions or filing fees or anything like that. But I got a question for you, even for myself. Let's say, somebody moved in, they're paying $2,000 a month. It's a $24,000 lease. We put all your clauses in the contract and in 6 months they're not paying and we get them out. Let's say the balance is $10,000 on the lease, right? Plus they still owe a month. Now we get them out through what I've seen, because for me, what's important is get them out, churn the unit, right? Now, let's say we get a default and we get an eviction and they're out in 3 to 4 weeks. What about the balance of the lease?
Yep.
Because a lot of landlords, this keeps them up at night, right? Am I getting the balance? Can I threaten for the 10,000 plus the 2,000? In my experience, I haven't really seen it collected, and most landlords just say they're out, churn the unit. What's your experience with this?
99.9% of landlords have learned through experience that you do not sue for damages. You just get possession, count one for possession only. That's all we do in 99.9% of our evictions. We can sue for damages if you want to pay more money, but in almost all cases, it's throwing good money after bad. And what do I mean by that? Just a couple things. Number one, the lion's share, the great majority of evictions, I'd say 90+% of the evictions that we do, if we're doing 300 to 400 evictions a month, let's say it's 300, I bet 280 of those are for non-payment of rent. So if they're not paying their rent, why do they care about a judgment for damages? Number one. Number two, I can tell you from my own tenants, my properties are not in the worst areas. They're workforce housing. They're in okay, decent areas. Almost all of my tenants have credit scores below 640, most below 620, and even many below 600, many in the 500s. I'm not that concerned about credit scores. If I was concerned about credit scores, all my properties would be empty. So if you learn that as well, if you own workforce housing, class C plus, type properties like I have, B minus, C plus. With that being said, if they have a 580 credit score or even a 600 credit score, again, they don't really care about a judgment for damages because the credits are.
You'll never get the money, right?
Anyway,
even if there's a lien, nothing.
Absolutely. And then the third thing is Florida's a notoriously debtor-friendly state. And what I mean by that, I'll give you one example, is that there's something called a head of household exemption. So if you're the primary breadwinner in a family with children, depending on a certain circumstances, you have to read the statute, but you can raise that as a defense. So even if I get a judgment against a single mom or a single father, for example, or maybe the mother makes more than the father, for example, or whatever the situation is, there's a high likelihood that I'm not going to be able to collect even with a judgment. I can get a judgment for $5,000 or $10,000 that's due, but collecting on that,
didn't know that.
garnishing their wages, garnishing their bank accounts is going to be very, very difficult, especially if they trigger that head of household exemption. So,
so it's almost just
I'm a lawyer,
turn the unit.
I get more or less free legal services at my firm. I don't sue for damages. So you shouldn't either.
Now, in commercial leases, it's a different game.
Very different. Very different.
Okay, that's what I
want to get one quick tip is if you're going to buy commercial, retail, industrial, whatever it is, depending on, listen, if it's a class C industrial, like in a bad area and you're I don't know what type of tenants you're getting, but just generally in most commercial, you want to get a personal guarantee. You want them to sign personally. So meaning maybe the tenant's name is, ABC Auto Repair LLC. Fine, that could be the tenant's name, but you want Jose Rodriguez, who's the owner of that LLC, to sign personally and guarantee that lease so that you can sue him for damages. And
right. Big difference.
Yeah.
Right. Because the LLC can file bankruptcy and then that's it. Right. So that's a clause in your lease, a personal guarantee on a commercial policy.
So
a commercial lease.
Most commercial leases that we draft, we certainly ask the clients. A lot of times we're getting the LOI, the letter of intent already that has the terms in it. But if it doesn't have a personal guarantee in it, we're going to ask the client, if let's say it's the landlord who's sending us this business, do you want a personal guarantee? We recommend it. But there are some situations that landlords maybe don't do that. Again, maybe depending on the property, maybe they have a property in a not so great area and the tenants are these small little executive offices and, there's a lot of turnover. And they know that maybe some of these tenants are not really collectible either. They're little cell phone repair guys or, these little, I call them little miniature businesses, self-employed people, which is great. We love self-employed.
Right. No, I get it. Listen, the biggest nightmares that I've seen are like when you don't have a trusted attorney, right? So he's dropping little things, guys, that you don't like. They're powerful, like a personal guarantee, right? You have a commercial building and someone signs a lease and an LLC, they don't do well. It's a store or a restaurant. Guess what? They file bankruptcy. You're not getting paid. And it could be even more difficult to get them out. It's a whole process. Absolutely. That's serious, right?
And even if that auto repair company that you're evicting from your industrial spot doesn't file actual bankruptcy, maybe they're just having some money problems. So you sue it, you get a damages judgment against that LLC. All he has to do, maybe again, it's ABC Auto Repair. Maybe he opens ABC Auto Repair 1, LLC. So he just tweaks the LLC, opens a new bank account, and good luck collecting on that. It's not an established business that just reopen a new LLC and start over.
No, that's huge. Right. So since we're talking mostly about residential, we'll stick because that's what you and I could spend an hour on commercial, but we wanted to drop that and we'll have them on another show. But quick question, is there anything in your leases that give you quicker control of the property back or any kind of clause that can accelerate an eviction, something like that, or no?
Great question. I get these questions periodically from potential clients or clients who haven't filed a lot of evictions, and they say, is there a way to expedite the eviction process? Is there some fee that I can pay? The short answer really is no. The good news, that's the bad news. The good news is twofold. Number one, evictions in Florida are summary procedure, which means that they move much, much quicker than a traditional lawsuit. Let's say you and I got in a contractual dispute and we sued each other for $500,000. That lawsuit could take 2 or 3 years. Whereas in county court evictions, it typically takes anywhere from about 3 to 7, maybe 8 weeks, depending on the county, depending on the judge, depending on if the tenant fights it, depending on if a hearing is required after the tenant fights it. So a number of factors, but it's pretty darn quick compared to other states. So you're looking anywhere in that 3 to 7, 8 week time frame. There's one other thing, though, that I put in our landlord or don't put in our landlord-friendly lease that we sell is I don't put a grace period in there. So many leases have grace periods, and they have a 3-day or a 5-day, sometimes longer grace period for tenants
to pay the rent. Okay, got it.
But I say two things. I say, number one, the statute requires a 3-day notice anyways. No matter whether you have a grace period or don't have a grace period, you have to put a 3-day notice in there. So sometimes landlords aren't even serving those notices until the 7th or 8th of the month at the earliest. And then there's a weekend involved, so they're not demanding the rent until the 12th or the 13th of the month. That's midway through the month. That's not good. And then let's say the tenant doesn't pay, you're not filing your eviction until midway through the month.
It's so funny you say that, right? Because my property manager, he doesn't file till like the 15th. And I'm like, listen, this is the 3rd month in a row because we have a grace period on the 5th. This is his lease, right? And I didn't agree with it. And I go, well, what are you doing? He goes, Jerry, I'll get the money. And I go, they have a 5-day grace period, then a 3-day notice. And I'm like, so now it's close to the 15th and you're calling Jerron's office? And I'm like, I've lost 2 weeks. Yeah. So do you suggest moving quickly on evictions, like right off the bat? Like, is there a statistical?
Depends. So
how many landlords get caught up in that emotion of listening? Oh, I'll pay you on the 10th, right?
Absolutely. So it depends. Yeah. If I've had a good tenant in there for 3 years and this is the first time they're late and they call me and they're in communication or my property manager and they say, hey, Jerron or Aaron, my property manager, hey, I just, whatever. I had a big medical bill last month. I had to go to the ER. I had to pay this. I will have, I can pay half the rent, my $900 today. Can I pay the other $900 next Friday? And I promise next month it'll be on time.
Right.
For someone like that, I'm going to work with them and I'm going to do not just the right thing by them, but also the right thing by me because they show no pattern of late payment. They're not a derelict tenant. But for example, I have one of my tenants that this is the second time she's going into eviction, but she's been late almost every single month since move-in or like 2 years ago. And I've had it with her. And so I filed the eviction, but what I'm doing is I'm putting her on what's called a stipulation agreement. So she's in eviction, a stipulation agreement. I work out a payment plan. She's borrowed some money from her daughter and she's got some money and she's going to pay the great majority of it in one payment. And then we're going to break up the court costs and fees over a period of 4 or 5 months. And then she's got to pay her regular monthly payments over that period of time, along with the partial payments for the court costs and fees. So let's say it's, $800.
Didn't know this existed, right?
Court costs and fees. She's going to pay $150 each month over 4 or 5 months. And then if she falls behind on any one of those payments at any given time, I do not have to file a new eviction all over again and take 3 to 7 weeks to get her out. I can file an affidavit of noncompliance, and within a week or less, I will have a final judgment, and I don't need to pay new filing fees for that. So that's a powerful tool.
Never heard that. Right. Go ahead.
So I like to keep those recidivist offenders. I like to file my evictions rapidly on them, put them on a payment plan, that stipulation agreement, but it needs to have an eviction file because if you just put them on a written payment plan, there's no eviction and it's not court ordered and you don't supply it to the court and file it along with an order where the court grants it and they monitor it, then it really has no power. You're just modifying the terms of your lease. If you're putting a repayment plan and you haven't filed an eviction and it's not court ordered. So Really powerful tool to have. If you use this for evictions and you run
Huge.
into that situation, we will give you that tool to use and we'll help you through that and help you draft that up.
What's the quickest way to reach you? I mean, obviously, everyone below, his description's here, his email's here, his websites are here. Again, evictions, all of that we talked about. What's the best way to reach you, Jerron?
Quick, easy number, 877-871-8300. Again, 877-871-8300. You can also visit our website, kellegrantlaw.com. Kelley is with an EY. So one more time, Kelley, Kelley, Grant, Grant, law, LAW.com.
And everything's down below in there. And again, he handles anything from, like we mentioned, right? The beginner investor, right? Strategize with Jerron. He's there for you all the way to, developers and syndication, land deals, and you name it. So there's a big level of sophistication. Plus also you handle HOAs, right?
Right. So the 5 high-level practice areas that we have.
Okay, go for it. Yes.
Closing department. So I run and manage our closing department. We do everything transactionally around closings. Our landlord-tenant law department, where we file those 300 to 400 evictions per month across the state of Florida, all 67 counties. We have a litigation attorney, Corey Carano, who handles any type of litigation or dispute between parties, typically involving real estate. Doesn't have to be. There can be some corporate disputes or corporate litigation, but generally it's around real estate. We have a wills, trust, probate, and estate attorney, Brett Halpern, that he will go ahead and help put together plans and LLCs and trusts and wills. Or sadly, if someone passes away that owns property or a family member, we can file probates on that as well and help you to sell that property through probate. And the last thing is association law. We do represent associations. Caratanis runs our association department. And sometimes we also fight associations too. So,
got it. And you're all around the state and everywhere in Florida. He does it all and so on and so forth. You know what? I forgot one last question, because I actually had a client in my office this morning and he asked me about a new squatter law in Florida or something that has changed recently. Is that true?
So yes, in the last 2 years, the legislature with Governor DeSantis has signed a law into place. Essentially, it's what's called, with squatters, if they are a true squatter, that let's say maybe they broke into the property, they have never been invited into the property, they don't have any kind of ID that has the address on it, utility bills. There's a whole list of things on there that can help determine whether they are a squatter or an invited guest who no longer should be there. Those are kind of 2 different categories. So if they are a true squatter and they fall under these categories or technically do not fall under them because they don't have an ID, don't have utilities there, etc., the police can remove them as long as the owner goes ahead and signs an affidavit stating that they are a squatter. In many cases, police will remove them. That did not used to happen. There's still the process that if they, for example, are an unwanted occupant in the property. So, for example, it could be a situation where a boyfriend owns the property. Girlfriend has lived there for a couple months, never paid rent. Boyfriend, they get in a fight. Boyfriend asks her to leave. She refuses to leave. That's an unlawful detainer. So Chapter 82 of Florida statutes, we file those as well. Those are dispossessory actions.
Got it.
Or it could be other types of things. Could be an adult child, 19 years old, gets on drugs. Parents want him out of the property. He refuses to leave. Can be a handyman maybe who was given a free unit to go on the
with no lease,
property,
right?
With no lease and never paid rent. He gets fired. He's stealing or whatever it is. He refuses to leave. Again, unlawful detainer. All of those are examples of unlawful detainers.
Can the police actually remove them on the spot, or you still have to file some sort of a process?
In those scenarios that I just named, those examples, we would have to file an eviction, but it's really an unlawful detainer. Landlord-tenant laws, Chapter 83. Unlawful detainers, Chapter 82. Different statute, but it is both. This summary procedure as well tends to take kind of that 3 to 8 week time frame to get them out of the property, similar to a
very interesting. Yeah. And by the way, Jerron, on your website, you offer a lot of free stuff, right?
A lot of free forms. You can go on our website, kellegrantlaw.com, Kelley with an EY. Go to at the top of the page, you'll see resources, and you can go to the forms. It has free forms like the free 3-day notice, security deposit claim letter, non-renewal of lease, termination of month-to-month tenancy. All of those forms are on there for free for all of our landlords.
No, that's huge because a lot of, how many times I see people using just the wrong form that will screw it up, right?
Absolutely.
Or the wrong date. And if you get somebody who's, paying attention, right, the judge and things like that. So,
It becomes a
I mean,
problem.
listen,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, he's done all my evictions. I don't think, first of all, it cost me less than like $400 every time, right?
Around
And I don't
530,
think,
but yeah, but 530,
yeah,
but yeah,
right, around $530, right?
yeah,
Well, it's been years, so it probably, and that's the court fee, and he's got it down to a science. And by the way, we've never actually had to go through the eviction. They're out at your default because they're not responding because his office, they file electronically. They get a process server out like that. It's a machine, right? It's not like this drawn out process, some attorney scaring you as a landlord. But I think in every case, they left even, yeah, you got a default and then you writ of possession, and we never went the next step because it went so quickly with your office that the tenant was a little shocked, right? Where
yeah,
the old lawyer could, oh, well, we got to do this, and you got to take it to the sheriff office, and it's 6 weeks before they even get a default, right?
yeah, yeah.
So,
All depends on the situation, but yes, we do not dabble in landlord tenant law. We are like to consider ourselves experts in it. We have a deep depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge at our firm, just based on the number of cases we filed and been a part of, and we've seen just about everything. Every once in a while, something will surprise me, but we've seen bankruptcies, and during evictions, we've seen all kinds of people dying in the middle of an eviction, people in the military. There's all different types of scenarios
right.
that we help people to handle with. So
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Jerron, let's just recap really quick here for the audience. You've got legal clauses you can use today from watching this show to improve control over your portfolio. Eviction strategies that shorten timelines and save cash. Acquisition filters that make title, zoning, closing, financing clean in the deal without a real risk. That's what you learned today. And a real risk structure that starts with how you structure a deal before you purchase it. And that's the key when you have real players with real integrity and efficiency that are looking out for your best interests in mind. That's Kelley Grant Law. That's Jerron Kelley. Of course, it's me. That's why we're friends. But that's the blueprint. And most investors miss it. It's simple, but it's true. So you don't have to miss it. Why? Because you just got it right here on Real Estate Profit Boost. So if you got value from this today, share this episode with your friends, with your partners, your property manager, operators, all of it. And make sure you're subscribed because the next episode of Real Estate Profit Boost, that one, after this one, we'll add another 6 figures to your portfolio. So, Jerron, thank you so much. Appreciate all the time, right? Everyone knows where to find them. Take a look below, all the things. And that's a wrap. Another episode of Real Estate Profit Boost,
thanks, Jerry.
a community where we learn and grow from each other. Rock and roll.